No matter what you do for a living, you and I probably have a whole lot of the same types of regular, everyday problems. Like, you know how when you have a bunch of 36-inch wide pieces of paper that are like 7 feet long and you gotta roll them all up on top of each other really tightly so that they fit in a cardboard tube but not too long so that you can mail them to somebody? It's frustrating, right? Well, that's a problem that I have too. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I realized that this is a very specific, maybe unique to me problem, but I think it's an opportunity to build a specific solution for a specific problem. And I've told you before, that's like one of my favorite things. And I think it's something that everybody can learn to do in their own situations. So let's talk about the problem. If you go to ILikeToMakeStuff.com, you can buy digital plans for a lot of the different projects that I've made. Lots of pieces of furniture, including arcade cabinets. And along with those digital build plans, I also sell some printed paper templates that actually help you cut out some of the more complicated pieces just a little bit easier. And all of those printed templates are printed in that room right there, and I personally roll them up and put them in cardboard tubes to put them in the mail. And honestly, it's kind of a pain. And it's kind of a pain because you know how when you roll up a long piece of paper, it doesn't necessarily roll straight. One end of it can often kind of cone out, spiral out, which means the entire roll gets longer and it doesn't fit in the tube as well. Well, that's even worse when you have multiple pieces of paper that you're trying to roll up at the same time. So that's what we're gonna try to solve. So my goal is to make a simple benchtop machine where I can lay in multiple pieces of paper, I can roll them up nice and straight, nice and tight, and before I take it out of the machine, I wanna be able to put rubber bands on the roll to hold that shape. And that's because I don't want it to unfurl inside the tube. That actually makes it hard for people to get the paper out. So I wanna make it so I can just drop it in and they can pull it right out of the tube when they receive it. This stack of papers right here is one set of plans, and I often have to send multiple sets together. But I want to show you on this one set what a couple of the problems are that we actually have to overcome. Okay, so the first point of frustration here is that I have multiple pieces that are really long and I need all of them to be aligned on the entire side. So I need some sort of a track that kind of funnels the pieces into alignment, so that as they go into my machine, they will already be lined up. But even if I can get all of these outside pieces aligned, I have to get all 3 of the pieces or more together and then roll them up into a small enough starting roll that the whole thing's not too big. And then I have to be able to roll it evenly forward, both sides at the same pace, so that it doesn't get crooked and it ends up doing this. Because as soon as you start rolling one side faster than the other side, you end up with this. And that is the big problem. We've got our stack of paper, and here's what I think we need. Some sort of a little track on both sides that forces the pieces of paper to the right width so that they have to be lined up. And then some sort of a bar that runs across the end that maybe sandwiches the pieces of paper or slides over them, but it grabs those and holds the top together, and then you can roll that bar to start to tighten it up. But the problem with that is that you have to use one hand to roll the rod and then the other hand to hold the paper tight so that it doesn't unroll itself, unless you don't. I've got this little paper roll that we're gonna steal an idea from. It's too short to use for the plans, but it has this spring-loaded arm that actually keeps pressure on the roll so it can't unroll itself. And that's gonna be perfect for this. So we've got the beginnings of an idea. I have a 3/4 inch dowel, so let's go design something in Fusion. I did some initial modeling. I don't know if it's right or not, but I'm gonna print some of those pieces and see if it's gonna work. But here's the idea. So we have 2 mounts that are gonna have a dowel that runs in between them. And then that dowel is gonna have a slit right down the middle of almost all of it so that you can slide it in from the end, slide it over the paper, and then it'll be captured on the other side. That way you can spin the dowel. But we also need a handle that's gonna be mounted right here. But that means that the dowel also has to be able to pass through that handle, but I have to have a way for them to lock together so that they don't spin away from each other. So this dowel has to be longer and have some sort of a little captured nut thing here that's attached to the dowel but not attached to the wheel. I'll just print the pieces. It'll probably make more sense. And while I'm waiting on those pieces to print, I can go ahead and cut the slot in the dowel. Now I've tried to figure out a good way to do this. I don't think it really matters if the slot is straight, but I just want it to be straight. So I'm gonna try to glue a piece of wood temporarily to the side of this so that there's a flat section that I can run through the bandsaw so it doesn't spin. I don't know, let's just give it a shot. Well, that kind of worked. Turns out that even that little bit of hot glue on poplar is enough to kind of rip it apart and rip some of the plywood off of my stands, but kind of damaged it. So I think I'm gonna have to come up with another way to do that. Plus the fact that I didn't really expect this to be quite so floppy. I guess I should have, but I didn't. All right, so the cut's not straight, but I don't think that really matters. As long as you get paper through here, clamp it down, and then start to turn it, it's gonna add pressure to it, and that's really what I want. So as long as it can hold it, I think we'll be good to go. I also made the slit a lot longer than it's going to need to be, but I actually haven't figured out how wide the whole thing end to end should be yet, so I just went ahead and made a little extra, and I'll just cut it off when I figure that out. But I'm gonna set that aside for now because the first 3D prints are done, and it's these two little guides for the paper. These are gonna go on a surface as my like in-feed of the paper that goes into the roller. So I need a surface to put these on. I'm a novice woodworker at best, so I don't have like a lifetime's worth of knowledge that I can share with other people. But if you're trying to become a better woodworker, today's sponsor is excellent for you. It's the Woodworkers Guild of America. This is an awesome resource full of all sorts of woodworking instruction, ideas, inspiration, and no matter your skill level, you're gonna find something here that can help you level up. They have tons of articles, downloadable resources, and a huge library of premium videos that give you detailed woodworking instruction from an expert. They've got videos on making fine furniture, but lots more. They've got videos on specific tool usage and how to use them safely and correctly. They've got videos on turning and finishes and all sorts of stuff. It's a great library that will be useful to you no matter your skill level. Plus, it's a great community of people who are all just trying to learn new stuff. Now, they've got an offer for you, and I had to read this on the paper several times to make sure that I was saying it right. They are saying the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a full year of premium membership to the Woodworkers Guild of America for only $1.49. I don't know how that works, but it's a really, really good deal. And so if you are at all interested in learning more about woodworking, go check them out. Hit the link down below. Big thanks to the Woodworkers Guild of America for sponsoring this video. So I made a little baby ramp, and I made the ramp because of this piece. This handle needs to be able to spin, and so it's gonna be sitting up in here somewhere. There's enough room for my hand to be able to turn it, and this piece is gonna be mounted in this. This bracket's gonna be mounted right here on the edge with a couple of screws, and that is gonna hold the handle. The handle can spin in it, but they need to be stuck together, so you got this little ring that's a friction fit that will go on there and keep the handle in place. So there's gonna be one of these assemblies on both ends, right on the edge, so that the rod can come through this one and go down and end up in the other one. So the rod feeds in through here, but there's nothing that locks the rod and the wheel together. They can spin independently, but I want them to spin together, and that's why I made this little castle nut thing. This little castle piece is made really tightly to fit with friction just around the end of this dowel. And then the little castle pieces on the other side lock into the mating holes on this when they're put together. Now I've got the bar on and my little paper guide rails on. I haven't even thought about that whole pressure bar that I need to add, so we're gonna get to that. But before we do, I need to do at least a basic test with a single piece of paper to make sure what I've got so far is even remotely right. Totally working. Wow, that's actually working really well even without the little bar thing. Okay, when it gets loose there though, it unspins. All right. Now, as far as the tension bar that's gonna lay on top of this, I really have not thought about it at all. In fact, the only thing that I've done is buy another piece of dowel because I assume I need to make some sort of a bar that kind of pushes down across the thing. But as I'm holding it here, I'm realizing maybe I don't need something that goes all the way across. Maybe I just need a couple of fingers that like press down. As any good maker does, I have a random box with a bunch of springs in it, and there's a couple different kinds in here, some of which are not gonna be useful, like this one. This is a compression spring, and it's already sprung. You can compress it down and make it smaller, but then it's gonna try to spring itself back out. This is useless in this situation. What I need is an extension spring, like this, where it's already tight. You can pull it out and it's gonna try to tighten itself back. Unfortunately, the ones that I have are this long, and I need about half that. So my idea originally was to steal the thing from the little paper roller that I showed you earlier. And it might work, but it's actually a little bit more complicated than I realized. Basically, you have the roller that we're trying to wrap the paper around. Then you have some sort of another roller that's gonna press against it. That is on some sort of an arm that's on a pivot point so that it can move back and forth. And then you gotta figure out exactly the right geometry based on the spring that you're using to connect somewhere in the middle to somewhere down here. And then that spring tension is gonna pull these two together, but also has to be able to allow it to be pulled back and locked in this location so that you can load the paper. And I'm not really sure how to figure all that stuff out when I don't even have the springs. So instead of keeping all this connected all the time and relying on this spring to be enough here and here and here, why don't we just get rid of the spring and use something a little bit more lo-fi, like a rubber band. That way we have some sort of a thing that is loose whenever you need it to be loose, but then you can take a rubber band and hook it right there around the arm, back down to add the tension that you need. To fusion. Got more pieces off the printer, and this is actually version 2 of this. I think it's gonna work, but we gotta try it out. All right, this took me a little bit to figure out exactly how these pieces should go together, and I'm not entirely sure that it's right. We gotta try it. So theoretically, this should screw into the piece of wood, and the rubber band should provide just enough tension on this piece to keep the paper against the roller. And it does. Of course, if you need to release that pressure, you can just take off the rubber band and it moves out of the way. I think those are gonna actually work pretty well. Plus, I can just remove the rubber band in case I need to get these out of the way. Speaking of rubber bands though, we haven't talked about the idea for putting rubber bands on the rolls once the paper is rolled up. But it's actually really simple. When I designed this whole assembly thing down here, I actually left a little space right there, and that space is for adding rubber bands. So on each end of this, I can actually preload some rubber bands right on this little sleeve. Then I go through the process of rolling up the paper. And after it's rolled and tight with that, I can just roll one of these rubber bands off the end onto the paper and roll it down to where I want. On each end, it should be good to go. Theoretically, but we need to try it. All right, in this plan, I have 3 pieces of paper that are different lengths. We're just gonna give it a shot and see how it turns out. Here goes nothing. It is totally working. Look how smooth that is and in line. All right, let's see if our tension works. Look at that. And then we gotta add rubber bands. So far, so good, but let's try to actually take it off the roll and see if it all stays where it's supposed to stay. It's like, I mean, look at this. It's perfectly aligned. That works way better than I thought it would. So this set of plans goes in this size cardboard roll, and it actually works pretty fantastic. It goes all the way in, and because it's not unrolled at the end, it's flat enough that the top goes on perfectly well without crushing the paper on the inside. So I will call this a win, but I found a problem. The deal is that rolling up one set of plans of this length actually makes the roll big enough that it almost touches the wood down here. But I often get orders for 2 or even 3 sets of plans that I roll up together and put them in a larger cardboard tube. And unfortunately, I don't have the room to roll them up right here. And ironically, I got an order this morning from Jesse in New York. Hi, Jesse, ordering 2 sets of plans. And so for this little tool to be even useful today, I'm gonna have to change it just a little bit. So I think the simplest solution is actually just to change this piece right here, making it taller, which will lift the entire thing off the wood a little bit, making more room for more paper. Now, the only downside to that is that the paper, as it enters this roll, is coming from this surface. And so I'm gonna have a really steep little area right there, which might fold the paper. So I'll just need to push this guide back a little bit to smooth the angle. Luckily, printing these pieces takes about 30 or 40 minutes, so let's give it a shot. You may notice that there are no rubber bands here to put on the roll when it's done. I'm gonna try some low-tack painter's tape. I think it'll be easier to deal with and it won't damage the paper. That totally works. That was pretty awesome. Now, I think that the little guide rails on the side could probably be improved to force the paper or like funnel the paper into the right shape, but I can work on that. But look at this. That's a lot of paper rolled up, and it's not perfectly flat, but you can make it flat. It's not so tight that you can't push it a little bit, which is actually really fantastic. Now, the times that I've had to roll up this much paper before, I've had to use a 3-inch tube because I just couldn't roll it tight enough. But check this out. This is a 2-inch tube, the same size that I used before, and it totally fits in there. And also, one of the reasons I wanted to use tape this time is because when you push it in the tube, the rubber band rolls around and actually might pop off the end. Jesse, thank you for letting me test with your order. I'm gonna throw a pencil and some stickers down in here just so you know that this is actually the one that I used in the video. But let's talk about the machine. Now, this was like my first swipe at this as a machine, so there's definitely room for improvement. Like, for instance, loading the paper into it initially is kind of a pain. Like, it would probably help a little bit for these rails to be longer, just to kind of funnel the pieces in, and maybe make it so that they could slide out of the way or flip out of the way. So you could line the paper up, all of the different pieces, and then put the rails up to them. I think that would be easier. But like I said, this was really my first idea. This was the first pass at this as a tool, and you watching probably saw something that would make it way better, and you're maybe yelling at your screen. Well, leave those ideas down in the comments, because if we can make this better, it will make my days a little bit easier, and I would appreciate the help. That's it for this one. Thanks for hanging out with me. Catch you on the next one. Then I just go about rolling up the paper. Roll up the paper. But look at this. That is a lot of paper. Papier. The whole thing has to be mounted on something so that it can, that doesn't make any sense at all. Let me think about how to say that. So that papers can slide. Wow, that just is really terrible. Hold on.